Good evening, everybody. Good evening for Bible study. I have the Franklin here listening to me tonight. Oh, isn't he freaky looking? Look at his giant eyes. Oh, he's awesome. Alright, I got Cece next to me. She might eat flowers, if you remember from last week, but she's pretty good. Let's open up with prayer. I closed with prayer last time. Let's open with prayer this time. Dear Lord, I thank you for this day. I thank you that whoever's watching this, that they would have open minds. I pray that you would speak through me and that your words would come through me and that we would have a better understanding of your word. Lord, as always, I pray for anyone that's sick, especially with COVID going around, Lord. I just pray that you would touch them, and if it be your will, that you would heal them and just give us all peace. And it's in your name that we pray. Amen. All right, I found my beautiful maps. So we are going to do a real quick, I dropped my cord, a real quick recap. We ended last week at Leviticus 26, and so brace yourself. We are about to fly through with a really quick recap from Genesis to the end of Leviticus. So, Genesis, God creates the heaven and the earth, creates man and everything. Man falls into sin, not a good time. And we have Noah come along. We have a little bit of time in between there, but man falls into horrible sin. God decides to wipe the slate clean. And we have Noah with the flood, wipes out all of mankind except for Noah and his family who are obedient to him. After the flood, people multiply on the earth. They decide to get together and build a giant monument to themselves, which is the Tower of Babel. God is like, nope, not going to happen. Confuses the languages. That's where we see the start of nations, when the languages get split up and everybody kind of goes their separate ways. Now we're to my maps. This might make it a little clearer. So, I didn't have this last week. We have, it's backwards. Alright, I gotta concentrate. Oh, Israel's right. Oh, this is hard. I gotta look. Alright, Israel's right in here. Okay, just for reference, because all my maps are the same. So, just remember, Israel, which I have labeled on here as Canaan, is right along that seashore, okay? So, everybody remember, we have Abram, comes from right? He goes up. Oh no, where'd my little thing go? We'll get there. There we go. He starts in He goes up here to a place called Haran, and then down into Canaan. So we have Abram. Abram has Isaac. Isaac has Jacob. Jacob has 12 sons, one of which is Joseph, who's the favorite, but the other 11 don't like that. Sell him into slavery. Joseph and the Technicolor Dreamcoat, that's what I'm talking about. He ends up down in Egypt. Big famine. Everybody goes to Egypt because Egypt has grain stores, including his brothers who think he's dead. They go from Canaan down into Egypt. At this point, Joseph's the vizier, second in line, right after the Pharaoh. And brothers end up going in saying, hey, can we get some grain? Because we're in famine and like everybody else. And they see Joseph and they're like, ruh-roh. Joseph could have had him killed, but instead said, hey, go back up to Canaan, bring the whole family down. Pharaoh gives them land down in Egypt. They multiply. Everything's great. New Pharaoh comes along eventually and is like, hey, I don't like these guys. Puts them into slavery. That's how the Israelites down in Egypt ended up as slaves. Okay? Moses comes along, floats down the river in the basket, friends with the Pharaoh, let my people go. Plague, 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 plague. Pharaoh's like, get out. So he rescues them. Here's my little red arrow right there. Crosses the Red Sea. Goes into the Sinai Peninsula. Then they go over to Mount Sinai, right here. Moses goes up onto Mount Sinai, gets the 10 Commandments from God, comes back down, which actually that's Mount Sinai, the little mountain I drew, not the word, the mountain. I just noticed that, oh, it's all backwards, the arrow. So we're on the Sinai Peninsula, which that makes sense, Mount Sinai on the Sinai Peninsula. Goes down, sees the Israelites going crazy, throws the 10 Commandments that God wrote onto the stone tablets down, breaks them. God's not really happy about that, by the way. They collect up the pieces. Also, while they're walking around in the desert, they need food. Israelites whine a lot. So they're like, hey, we need food. God brings manna down from heaven. Collect that up into the Ark of the Covenant. Pieces of manna. Aaron's staff, which sprouted. And the broken tablets of the 10 Commandments, all into the Ark of the Covenant. Let's see what my next map is. Oh, we're not there yet. Alright, so they are basically, let's see, we're at Leviticus. So that's when Moses is writing down all the laws, right? So, Leviticus, when he's writing Leviticus, actually takes place, let me bring it up. It's somewhere there at Mount Sinai. Leviticus is written while they're still at Mount Sinai. And it's further laws. Again, chapters 1 through 7, we have the different types of offerings. Chapter 8 through 10, they establish the priesthood of Israel, men from the tribe of Lehi, who are the representatives of God to the people, and the people to God. They're like the middlemen that talk to God, God talks to them, they pass it on. And it's the tribe of Lehi. Lehi. I work up in Lehi, So the tribe of Levi. Chapter 11 through 15, we go over all the things that are clean and unclean. Chapter 16 is a cool one. Day of Atonement. We went over this last week. It's the one day a year when the high priest was allowed to go into the Holy of Holies in the tabernacle. And it's called today, Yom Kippur. And the priest would take 2 goats. One goat he would lay on his hands, confess the sins of the people, and release it into the wild, and that's called the scapegoat. The other goat he would lay on his hands, confess the sins of the people, and then sacrifice the goat and sprinkle the blood onto the ark, which was over the broken law, the broken 10 Commandments of God, and make atonement for the people. And I'm going to go into a little bit more detail with some of these things. I have my awesome illustrated Bible dictionary. And another name for that with the Ark of the Covenant, where they sprinkled the blood, was called the mercy seat. And Sounds of Skippack actually sang a song about the mercy seat a couple years ago. So let me just read what my Bible dictionary says about the mercy seat. So the mercy seat is a slab of pure gold measuring about 45 inches by 27 inches that sat atop the Ark of the Covenant, which was the same size. It was the base for the golden cherubim, which is referenced to Exodus 25:17 through 19 and verse 21. And it symbolized the throne from which God ruled Israel. On the Day of Atonement, the high priest sprinkled the blood of a sacrificed lamb or goat onto the mercy seat as a plea for forgiveness for the sins of the nation, which is Leviticus 16, verse 15. The Hebrew word means literally to wipe out or cover over. This has led modern translators to render the term cover lid or atonement cover, which atonement cover is used in the NIV. The mercy seat is based on the earliest Greek and Latin translations. The mercy seat has been replaced as the symbol and place of God's presence and atonement. Christ's cross and resurrection showed the perfect presence and accomplished atonement once and for all, which is referenced in Hebrews 9. So the mercy seat, which is the top of the Ark of the Covenant, is where this sacrificial lamb or goat, the blood was sprinkled on Yom Kippur. Then we moved into Leviticus. We skipped ahead to Leviticus 26, which I said, that's where we ended last week. And I said that is a very important chapter. Remember, there's going to be a couple chapters or verses that are going to be one of those you really want to highlight or really remember, because they're very important and really stretch on throughout the whole Bible. And when we get to oh, that's right, I got a comment! Woohoo! Deborah, you're watching! And that's true. The Levite priests, because anyone that touched the Ark of the Covenant or entered the Holy of Holies other than Yom Kippur would die. God's like, nope, not happening. Only on Yom Kippur. And they tied a rope. Thank you, Debbie, mother. They tied a rope around the ankle of the high priest in case he made a mistake and was struck dead in the Holy of Holies. They could pull him out. Very good. Thank you. I totally forgot about that. Little tidbit, you know. So there's going to be some verses and chapters, really, like Leviticus 26 is a whole chapter. You really got to commit to memory and really remember them, because they really do. Like Leviticus is early in the Bible, so this chapter is really going to become important, really all the way through the Bible. You're going to see in a second. I'll go over it again about what it's about, but it really does cover the whole Bible. Once we get to the New Testament, there's going to be things in there that really go all the way back to the beginning, and again, are very important ones to remember. Of course, every verse in the Bible is from God and is important to remember and apply to our lives as to the best of our abilities. But there's certain ones that really stand out, and again, when you remember them, put them into context, they make a whole lot of sense. Okay? Chapter 26 of Leviticus. Very important chapter. Summary of it: if you obey me, if God says to the Israelites, if you obey me, you'll be blessed, and this is what it's going to be. You're not going to have enemies. Any enemies that do come on are going to fall before you. You're going to have food. You're going to have water. You're going to have everything that you need. Just follow me, and you will be blessed. It's very simple. Follow me, do what I command, and you will be blessed. The flip to that, which is probably the first third of chapter 26, is God listing all the blessings. 2/3 is what's going to happen if you don't. And he says, if you disobey me, I will curse you. And this is what it's going to be. So chapter 26, verses 3 through 12, follow me, you'll be blessed. This is what it's going to look like. Chapter 26, from 16 to the end. Disobey me, and this is what it's going to be. And you're done. We're really going to see this over and over and over and over through Judges, and then through the books that are written based on specific judges. That's really where you're going to see that. So we're not quite there yet, but you're going to see this problem come up pretty soon. Okay? In Exodus, Moses leads them out of Egypt. They cross the Red Sea. They go into Mount Sinai. In Exodus chapter 19, God enters a covenant with the Israelites, and he says, I will make you a kingdom of priests. And the people say to God, all that God said, we will do. Nope. And that's where we go up to Leviticus 26. Obey me, you'll be blessed. Disobey me, you'll be cursed. And we're going to see this over and over and over again. So, now, we go into the book of Numbers. You know, growing up in church, and even when I was in Christian high school, Numbers really didn't make a whole lot of sense to me. I didn't really understand it. Now I get it a little bit better. So the book of Numbers, we're still in the Pentateuch. The Pentateuch is the first 5 books. Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers, and Deuteronomy, all written by Moses. Okay, so this is another Moses book. So God tells Moses to get ready to move off the Sinai Peninsula. So they're getting ready to move off the Sinai Peninsula, and he says, so count your fighting men. Numbers, making sense, right? Moses, get ready to move out, count your fighting men, organize them around the tabernacle, and start marching toward the land that I promised you. Okay, so now we're into the book of Numbers. So Numbers is all about them kind of, I guess you could call it a census kind of, but it's all about the fighting men. Count your numbers, and start getting them ready, because now we're going to start going towards the land that I promised you. The land flowing with milk and honey, right? So, all right, don't look at the top yet. Just look at the bottom, okay? Ignore my pretty arrows. We're looking here. All right, so I went the wrong way. We're in the Sinai Peninsula, right? And the Arabian deserts over here. Canaan, which is part of Israel, that's where they're going to be heading, okay? So now we're zoomed in. Here we are, northern Sinai Peninsula to Kadesh Barnea. Okay? So chapter 12 of Numbers, we arrive at Kadesh Barnea, which is in the desert of Paran. It's really hard to read this sometimes. So we arrive at Kadesh Barnea, desert of Paran, which is south of the Promised Land, just south. They're right on the edge. And God tells Moses, now this is important. It's a little subtle thing, but it's important. God tells Moses, send some spies in to the Promised Land, check it out, and scout the land. Okay? Now again, follow God, you're blessed. Disobey him, you're cursed, right? So Moses sends the spies in. The spies spend 40 days in the Promised Land. And the land was great. We see chapter 12, verse 23. Oh, this is crazy. Hang on, let me get my Bible. I'm still in my pretty purple King James. But that's fine. There's a lot of these and nows and stuff. All right, chapter 12. We're getting there. We're getting there. All right. So chapter 12, he sends the spies out. Now we move into chapter 13. The spies are in there, and chapter 13, verse 23. And they came, now this is talking about the spies that he sent in to the Promised Land. And they came unto the brook of Eshcol, and cut down from thence a branch with one cluster of grapes, and they bare it between two upon a staff, and they brought of the pomegranates and of the figs. Now, I know, that's King James. Let's put it into normal English. They cut down a cluster of grapes. And they had to put it between two guys with a pole to carry it. The land of milk and honey, the Promised Land. We're talking about like crazy stuff here. The land was great. They cut a branch with a single cluster of grapes, and it takes 2 men to carry it. I mean, that's pretty good, right? But they keep on scouting, and they also come across these guys that they're a little bit afraid of. And they're called the Anakim. Now let me check and see if my Bible dictionary talks about these guys. Because in Genesis I did not talk about the Nephilim. We'll get back to that sometime. Let me see if I have the Anakim in here. These are those little interesting tidbits. A-N-A. This is a big book. A-N-A. Aha! Alright, so, the Anakim. I'm going to read from my Bible dictionary. Personal and clan name meaning long-necked or strong-necked. The ancestor named Anak had 3 children, Ahiman, Sheshai, and Taimeh, which is from Numbers 13:22. They lived in Hebron and the hill country, which is from Joshua 11:21, before eventually being destroyed by Joshua. The remnants then lived among the Philistines. Here we go. These tall giants were part of the Nephilim. Arba was a hero of the Anakim. The spelling of Anakims put the English plural S on the Hebrew plural M, so the NIV uses Anakites in the name. But the Nephilim are referenced one other time, okay? And they're from Genesis. And this is just interesting little bits. So let's look up the Nephilim here. So here's the Nephilim. These are found in Genesis, okay? The Nephilim is a translation of a Hebrew word that designates a class of beings mentioned in Genesis chapter 6, verse 4, and in Numbers chapter 13:33. Some interpreters believe the word is related to Nephal, which means to fall. In Genesis chapter 6:4, the terms refer to heroes of old. So some have concluded that these are beings that have fallen from heaven and married the daughters of men. However, the text does not state that explicitly. Okay, so this is kind of theological debate here. This is not canonical. Okay, the word Nephilim is in Genesis, and then we have the Anakites or Anakim in Numbers, which refers back to the Nephilim. Okay, but there's no description in the Bible that specifically says this is what the Nephilim are. This is what taking those words and applying them to other Hebrew words kind of molds together. So this could be good, it could be bad, like right or wrong, but it's just interesting. And it'll make sense in a second when I tell you why I'm talking so much about the Nephilim and the Anakim. Okay? So at most, the text says that the Nephilim were on the earth during the days when the sons of God married the daughters of men. Oh, I don't want to read this next part because, I'm going to read it anyway, but we're going to get into it because this will give away my little surprise, okay? When the 12 spies that were sent to Canaan, these are the 12 spies we're talking about. They found these huge clusters of grapes that took 2 guys to carry 1 cluster, but then they also found the Nephilim, the Anakim. So when the 12 spies were sent to Canaan, they saw giants whom they called the Nephilim, beside whom they seemed small as grasshoppers. That's the actual text in the Bible. They came back, and they're like, we're like grasshoppers to these people, okay? So, again, there's no direct link in Numbers to link the Anakim that the spies report. Okay, there's no direct link to link the Anakim that they discovered in Canaan to the Nephilim of Genesis, but that's what they called them. They're like these giants, and they're scared. Okay, so let me recap again. We're in chapter 13, verse 23 of Numbers. Moses sent these spies in, okay, for 40 days into the promised land, and the land was great. They found one grape cluster. They had to carry on a pole between the 2 of them. But then they also found the Anakim, which they described as strong giants that make them feel like grasshoppers. So there's 12 spies. Okay? Two of them, Joshua and Caleb, said, who cares? Leviticus 26, trust God. Do what he says. He tells us to go in there. We go in there. We'll be blessed. What did God tell us? Any enemies before us will fall. 100 of us will lay down 10,000 of them. Trust God. No problem. But the 10 other spies, they're scared. And so they go back and they report that they're going to be crushed by these giants. Even though God's telling us to do this, we go in there, we're done. They say, God brought us here to die. Which is kind of funny, because when they're in the desert and they're starving, they kind of whined about that too. They're like, oh, we're hungry. God brought us here to die. And of course, God provides for them every single time. All the time. They forget Leviticus 26. Follow God. All your problems are gone. Disobey Him. Question Him. Turn away from Him. Done. So again, the people are there, the Israelites are there. Do we trust the 2? Or do we trust the 10? Well, of course they trust the 10. Are you kidding me? What did I tell you? Leviticus 26, you got to remember it because this is going to happen over and over and over again. So they believe the 10. They say God brought us here to die. And chapter 14. Oh, here we go. Oh, this will be epic. I should have left my Bible open to it, but I can find it quick. Here we go. So, Numbers chapter 14, verses 26 to 35. Again, I apologize. I'm in the King James. But Numbers 14, 26 to 35. I'll try to translate it into normal English as I read this. Okay? Oh, hang on. Pastor Larry's commenting. Hang on. So we have 12 spies. Okay? 12 spies. 2, Jacob and Caleb, I hope I spelled that right, are loyal to God. The other 10 question. So here we go. Ready? So chapter 14, 26 to 35. I'm going to try to translate my King James kind of into English. Okay? And the Lord spoke to Moses and to Aaron and said, how long should I bear with these evil congregation which murmur against me? He's talking about the Israelites here. I've heard the murmurings of the children of Israel, and they murmur against me. Say to them, as truly as I live, says the Lord, you have spoken in my ears, so will I do to you. Your carcasses shall fall in this wilderness, and all that were numbered of you. Remember, this is numbers. They just took a census of all the fighting men because they're ready to go into the promised land. They're right there. They're right there. Your carcasses shall fall in this wilderness. You're going to die on these lands. And all of you that were numbered, according to your whole number, from 20 years old and upward, which have murmured against me, doubtless you shall not come into the land, concerning which I swear to make you dwell therein. I'm going to stop there. That's chapter 30. You can continue reading on. He's telling them it's the same kind of thing. Anyone 20 years and older that murmured against him, which is pretty much all of them, will die. Wandering the desert. Here we are. I'm sure you've heard it. Wandering the desert. This is why. 2 guys came back. Oh yeah, there's giants. Leviticus 26. Trusting God. He's got our backs. We're fine. Wait till we get to Joshua. Oh, I'm excited. Watch this. But anyway, trusting God. You're good. 10 others. Oh, we're scared. And everybody else. Oh, we're scared. Guess what? You will not enter my lands. The lands I promised you, they're going to your kids. They haven't murmured against me. anyone 20 years and older, and this is important, anyone 20 years and older that spoke against him will not enter those lands. You're all going to die wandering the desert, but I'm going to reward your children. Because you're my promised people. Even after this, he still loves them. We mess up, we get punished. Pretty basic, right? So they're going to be punished for not trusting him. Leviticus 26, disobey me, I will curse you. That's where we're at. But he's going to reward their children. So the rest of the book of Numbers is them wandering. How many years? 40 years. Till every single one that spoke against him and was afraid to trust him perished. Wandering the desert. Once they're all gone, then we're ready to enter the Holy Land. But you know who didn't die during those 40 years? Joshua and Caleb. The two spies that were like trusting God, they were still alive. Coincidence, the next book is called, well, after Deuteronomy, when we go into the Promised Land, which I'm excited about, is the book of Joshua. Yeah, that's who we're talking about. The same one. Okay? So rest of Numbers, we're wandering the desert for 40 years. Everybody's dying, except for those two spies that Moses sent in of the 12, Joshua and Caleb. And we have the new generation rising up. And they start making their way east to the side of the Jordan River. And we're ready to enter the Promised Land. Let me show you my little map. We're not quite there yet, but almost. I zoomed in. See Jordan River, but what do we have first? We have a little mountain over here, still to the east. Now remember, we were in, oh, my map. This is hard to do looking down. Oh, no! We'll get there. There we go. Remember, we were at Kadesh Barnea, wandering, and we end up over here at Mount Nebo. What's Mount Nebo, you may ask? Why, let me tell you. Now we go into Deuteronomy. Moses, who's pretty much ready to die, is permitted to address the people one more time. And the book of Deuteronomy is Moses' address to the children of Israel, right before they're ready to enter the Holy Land. So the book of Deuteronomy, basically he encourages young people, because remember, we're in the new generation. Old generation, cursed, didn't follow God, died in the wilderness. The new generation has come up. He encourages them as they're about to enter the land to remember God's faithfulness. Leviticus 26. He encourages them to love God, to teach his word to their children, and to obey him. Leviticus 26. Finally, he looks ahead and he foresees Israel's future dispersion due to sin. Okay, we're going to get there. That's way in the future, but he foresees it. And he knows Israel's going to be dispersed and destroyed. But they're ultimately going to return. And at the end of Deuteronomy then, at the end of his final address, he dies on Mount Nebo in Deuteronomy chapter 34. So, upon Moses' death, Joshua becomes the leader. Joshua, the one of the two spies that is like, dudes, relax, we got this, trust in God. Good leader. So Joshua becomes the leader, and now we leave Mount Nebo, and we cross the Jordan River, and we go to Can you see it? Can you see it? Jericho. Everybody's heard of Jericho. Well, not everybody, but you know what I mean. It's a pretty popular story. So they come to the first city. They enter the land, cross the Jordan. They go into the promised land for the first time. And they get to this huge city. Go on Wikipedia. Look up Jericho. The walls are nuts. They've been doing archaeological work there. They're crazy. They're no joke. It's not like a 5-foot stone wall. These are huge, okay? And again, like I said last week, I believe the Bible literally. What it says is what happened, and I believe it. They're big walls, all right? So Joshua becomes leader. They cross the Jordan. They go into the promised land, and the first city they come to is this giant walled fortress called Jericho. So God tells Joshua to march around the city one time with all the armed men that they have, along with 7 priests carrying trumpets, which are ram's horns. I think it's called a shofar. I think that's a shofar or something like that. Look it up. Something like that. Ooh, wait, I got my Bible dictionary. Unless somebody comments quick before I find it, give it a shot. I'll beat you. I think it's a shofar. I'm probably saying that wrong. Oh, nobody's commenting. I guess Mom doesn't know. Oh, I'm close. Shofar. Oh, come on. Oh, Mom commented like a split second. Shofar. It's a ceremonial ram's horn that's also used to call the people of Israel together. That's from Exodus chapter 19, verse 16. Oh, and it was also blown on the Day of Atonement in the Jubilee year to signal the release of slaves and debt. I love this thing. Everybody get one of these. They're really good. So, march around the city one time. All your armed men, 7 priests, blowing the shofar, and carrying the Ark of the Covenant. Which, what's in that? God's law, the manna, Aaron's staff, mercy seat, right? The representative of God and the nation of Israel. Do this for 6 days. Every day. March around, blowing your trumpets. Every day for 6 days. On the 7th day, march around the walls 7 times. And after you've marched around 7 times, scream, yell, and make a racket. Freak out. Yell. That sounds kind of weird. Like if I was marching around, I'm like, hey, march around walls, scream and yell. Everybody like, what are you talking about? But they obeyed him. Right? They obeyed him. And guess what? The walls collapsed. And God delivered Jericho to them. In chapter 1 of Joshua, God says, if you obey me, everywhere your foot touches, I will give to you. All they have to do is obey him. Which doesn't sound that hard, but I mean, come on, we all know. It's not the easiest thing, right? But they do it. And the walls of Jericho come down. Then, you see next to Jericho? All right, now, here's a fun one. Remember Okay. This is spelled capital A, lowercase I. Guess how you say it. Is it A? I? No. Very simple. Ready? AI. Makes sense, right? So last week we had and this week we have AI. Go ask somebody tomorrow, hey, how do you spell AI? You know that city that was in Canaan? How do you spell AI? A-I. Right? I love these little things. These, I don't know. They just tickle me. I don't know. So anyway, Jericho. We obeyed God. He told march around, no problem. This was easy, right? So the Israelites are like, hey, come on, we got this. No problem. So they go over to this tiny, itty-bitty little city. We're talking like Jericho's Philadelphia, and Ai is like Birdsboro, okay? Tiny little city. No problem. And they don't ask God what to do. They just attack it. Guess what? They got whooped. Yep. So I guess that didn't work out so well for them, did it? Not about the size of the city. It's all about following, obeying, and having faith in God. So after this, okay, after this tiny little city that had probably no one in it, just like totally destroyed them, they learned their lesson. And from that point forward, they called upon God every time they went into battle. They went on to win. I don't know the exact count. I'd need to count them. But somewhere between 25 and 30 battles. So they beat Jericho, huge city, no problem, because they have God with them. They decide to try to do it themselves. Ai, tiny little city, defeated. After that, they're like, okay, we got it. They call upon God. They ask for his help. They obey him. And they're like 25 to 30 battles undefeated. Totally undefeated. And we see this in chapter 1, verse 8. So, after we defeat Ai, can we see that? Yes. Look at my little orange arrows. Okay, so first, after Ai, the conquest goes due east. Then they turn down towards the south. And then finally they go up and conquer the north. So, after the land was captured, the land was then divided up amongst the 12 tribes of Israel. And then finally, at the end of the book of Joshua, he encourages the people to fear and serve God before he died. Once again, Leviticus 26. Fear and serve him, and you'll be blessed. Disobey him, try to do things on your own, like with the Battle of Ai, not going to happen. And that's kind of an important lesson. Okay, this happened, a long time ago. But it still applies today, right? When I'm faced with a situation or a problem, you lift it up and you ask for guidance. And you say, the outcome, your will, might not be exactly what I want, but I trust you're going to take care of me. We're going to read later on that God will not ever put a situation before us that we cannot handle. The way that I kind of turn that around into a secular, when I'm talking to people, rather than getting all like religious on them, but I try to put it into like a secular context that they might not be religious, so they are respondent to, is, God tells us, again, there's never going to be a situation that I put you in that you can't handle. My way of saying that to people is, no matter how bad your situation is, there's always someone that's worse. And they can get through it. So why can't we? God's not going to put us in a situation that we cannot deal with or handle. He tells us that. The outcome may not be what we want, but we can deal with that. We can move on from that. Have faith, obey him, do what we're supposed to do, and you'll be blessed. I've seen it over and over and over and over and over again in my life, to the point that when things are going bad, dead honest with you, I don't even worry about it. I really don't. And my family can attest to that. They'll be like, what are we going to do? And I'm like, whatever. It'll be fine. And you know what? A day or two later, it's fine. That's what Leviticus 26 is telling us. And we're seeing through Numbers. And we're seeing through Joshua. Trust in him. Put your faith in him. Rely on him fully. And you're going to be fine. But you know what? You may look like the strong guy. You may be on top right now. But the second that you stop obeying, just like Ai, Jericho, oh my gosh, what are we going to do? You're the underdog. Rely on him, no problem. Ai, oh, we're the big powerful force, and you're totally destroyed. Have faith in him, put your trust in him fully, and that's what you're going to be fine. You're going to be blessed. Turn from him and you'll be cursed. The end of Joshua, again, he encourages the people, the Israelites, to fear and serve God. And then he dies. And then, I don't know if we're going to get through it tonight. We might. But now we get to the book of Judges. So, now Steph had commented on this before, and she's absolutely right. I think this was on the first week. I had said that the book of Judges they're not judges in the normal sense, but they're more in the sense of warriors. And she said, well, they also did judge, and that is correct. That is correct. Judges does not refer to, let me put it this way, Judges do not refer to a judge in the sense that we know. Okay? It's not a person sitting up there in a black robe, sitting up here, and they're making these judgments against us. A judge, in most cases, was essentially a military or a spiritual leader that God raised up to get his little peeps, the little Israelites, back on track and bring them victory. So you'll see the Israelites once again, and this is, it's so frustrating. Hindsight is 20/20, man. It's so frustrating. It's like a 300-year cycle. Not even joking. For 300 years, the Israelites start to slip away from God. And Leviticus 26, so some enemy will come in and start wiping them out. There'll start being problems within, the different 12 tribes. So God raises up either a military, if it's a, invasion or an enemy, he'll raise up a military leader, or if it's just the Israelites just not following God, he'll raise up a spiritual leader. And these leaders would come up and be like, yo, what are you doing? Leviticus 26. And remind them. And get them back onto track. And you'd see Israel just going downhill. And then the judge would come in. This military or spiritual leader. And it would go back up towards God. Right? And then eventually the judge would die of old age. And guess what? Back into sin. For 300 years. That's all you got. And they went through this cycle. If we scoot back a little bit to Deuteronomy, when Moses was still alive, God said through Moses in Deuteronomy chapter 7, he says, when you enter into the promised land, do not intermarry. Do not worship their gods. Utterly destroy them. And again, this is foresight. I don't remember what book it's from, but I remember one of my days in Bible class when I was at Westmont, our Bible teacher, and again, it's the foresight of God. I'm going from memory, and we're talking 22 years ago. I'd need to look it up, and maybe I'll look it up and I'll mention it next week so I can give you the reference. But there was an instance where the Israelites were attacking an enemy, and saying what I just said, Deuteronomy chapter 7, what God said through Moses is utterly destroy them. There was an instance where the Israelites defeated a people, and God specifically told them, like, to burn them, destroy them, get rid of everything. And I remember our Bible teacher made a connection with that for modern day that I had never even thought of before. And he said, like, why do you think God, literally, like in that instance, told the Israelites, like, burn them, destroy them, do not keep anything. And we were given different suggestions, like maybe there were idols or something like that. And I remember the Bible teacher said, well, think about it. Like, what about bloodborne? And with COVID, it's very relevant. What about bloodborne pathogens? Why were those bodies so important to burn and everything like that? Again, God, the Israelites don't know about this stuff. They don't know about diseases that these people could have. Natural immunities and stuff like that. And the Israelites were specifically told by God, like, do not intermarry with them. Destroy them, every single one, wipe them out. And you think back, and that's an interesting thought. Because, look at when the Spanish conquistadors came in to North America with the Aztecs and the Mayans. And they were decimated. Because I don't remember what disease it was or pathogen it was, but like a flu or something like that the Spanish had no problem with because they'd been exposed to it, hit the Aztecs and the Mayans, and wiped them out almost completely. There's a reason God's telling them to do this. It's not because God doesn't love people, but he's specifically telling them, don't intermarry with them. Don't worship their gods. Utterly destroy them. And when we're looking at Judges, right in the very beginning, right? Judges chapter 1, and it's really chapter 1 through 3, and it goes to, I think it's chapter 3, verse 6, and he's explaining to them, like, you're in my promised land now, and I'm telling you, all the way back in Moses' address in Deuteronomy, to wipe these people out. Because you intermarry with them, now all of a sudden, oh, hey, she's just a nice girl. She's not going to hurt me. I'm going to marry her. And next thing you know, she's got her idols and her gods up on the windowsill, and she's like, bow to them too. He knows what's going to happen. He tells them this before they even go into the promised land. Don't let yourself be in a position where you could be pulled into these false idols. And in Judges chapter 1 through 3, verse 6, so chapter 1 to chapter 3, and it ends around chapter 3, verse 6, we learn during that time they did not destroy them like God told them to do. They did intermarry with them. These are the people that were in the land of Canaan. They went in to conquer them. They didn't destroy them. They did intermarry with them. And then they start worshiping their gods. And from chapter 3, verse 7, all the way through to chapter 16, is where we see this cycle. And here's the cycle. I already kind of gave you what it was. Here's the cycle. This is what we call it. Sin, servitude, supplication, salvation. They disobey God, they fall into sin. Somebody comes in and beats them up. Because now at this point, Leviticus 26, God's like, nope, done. Nope, take them. So they sin. They fall into servitude. Supplication. Oh, we're sorry, we get it. We'll obey you. And these are the chosen people. So God saves them. Salvation. Sin, servitude, supplication, salvation. Be bad. Now you're defeated. Oh, we're sorry. Fine. I'll pick you up again. Be bad. Now you're knocked down. Oh, sorry. Fine, I'll do it again. For 300 years. Over and over and over and over. I could go for an hour with and overs. Israel did evil in the sight of God. Period. They didn't follow Leviticus 26. Every time they fall, they sin, they fall into servitude, supplication, and the salvation. All these judges that God sends, military and spiritual leaders, to lift them up after they ask for forgiveness. Gideon, Elon, Deborah, Jephthah. That's a mouthful, right? Where was Jephthah? Hang on, we gotta find. Oh, he's over here. Right there. Jephthah. That's a cool name. Abdon, Tola, Shamgar. That's a cool one. Barak, Jair, Ehud. Oh, this is going to go to her head, but Deborah. Deborah, you were a judge, apparently. Samson. Oh, he was a cool one. All these judges, they sin, they fall into servitude, supplication. Oh, we're sorry. And God saves them by raising a military or spiritual leader in Judges, chapter 17 to 21. All right, now, we're out of the Pentateuch. Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers, Deuteronomy. We are out of the Pentateuch. So this book was not written by Moses. So we have to say the author. Let me look quick. Oh, I've got 3 minutes. We got this. Let's look up Numbers quick. And let's see if any of the biblical scholars have any idea who the author might have been. Wow, that's a long one. 2 seconds. Ooh. The book carries the title Numbers in English, but the early Greek title was Arithmoi, and the Latin title was Numeri. In both instances, the title reflects a focus on the census is taken, so the book is named after the census is taken. We're not in Numbers. I don't know why I'm looking up Numbers. I mean, that was an interesting tidbit. Tangent, we're in Judges, because we know Numbers was written by Moses. Brain fart. Here we go, Book of Judges. Ooh! Ooh, they got a pretty map. I should just use this. Here, I'll pan it. Ready? All the little white squares are different judges. Deborah's in there. Hang on, where's Deborah? Ephraim. That's for you, Mom. Deborah. All right. Let's see. I don't think they really have an idea who the author was. Oh, look, I'll read this whole 3-page. Oh, no, they actually, in here, they just call him the author. So, no, it doesn't look like we know exactly who the author is. So, we'll say the author. So, that was a tangent. So, chapter 17 to chapter 21, the author, right? He pulls back the curtains. So, all through the book of Judges, we're seeing this cycle going on, all right? And we're seeing these spiritual and military leaders rising up for salvation. And then we get towards the end, chapter 17 to 21, the author pulls back the curtains and he's kind of saying, while all this was happening, let me show you what was going on. And he kind of goes into a little bit of detail that you don't really get during the Judges periods, but it's at the end of the book. He's like, while all this is happening, let me show you. You see idolatry. And remember I said in Deuteronomy chapter 7, when you go into the promised land, do not intermarry, do not worship their gods, utterly destroy them. Those 3 things. Commit to memory for a minute. Don't intermarry, don't worship their gods, utterly destroy them. What's the first thing we see? Idolatry. Not adultery, idolatry, worshiping other gods. We see immorality, which generally, if you see the word immorality, you're talking sexual immorality. I mean, let's be honest. That's generally, if the Bible's referring to immorality, that's what we're talking about. In one instance, the Benjamites, which are one of the tribes of Israel, were almost completely exterminated because of what was going on. Like, crazy. But here's the overarching theme of all of this. And this is from Scripture. In those verses, chapter 17 to 21. Everyone did what was right in his own eyes. Now, if I got up in church on Sunday and I preached a sermon that everyone should do what they feel is right in their own eyes, I don't think that would be a very scriptural lesson. I think the lesson should be everyone does what is right based on the teachings of God and Christ and what we're supposed to do and how we're supposed to live our lives, right? Kind of basic for most Christians. If you're not Christian and you're secular or humanist, then everyone did what was right in his own eyes is kind of their mantra. You can do good things, you can do nice things, but you're doing them based on what you think is right, not based on God's teachings, right? So the overarching theme of Judges, of course, like I said, 1,500 times tonight, is Leviticus 26. Obey God, you'll be blessed. Disobey him, you'll be cursed. And we see this cycle for 300 years. But that cycle gets paraphrased into that one sentence. Everyone was doing what they thought was right in their eyes. To me, everyone did what was right in their own eyes would be disobeying God. Because they're not doing what God told them to do. They're doing what they told them to do. And sometimes what God tells us to do isn't what we want to do. And most of the time what we want to do is not what God is telling us to do. So again, you're seeing that at the end of the book of Judges, the author says, like, this was the problem. They weren't obeying God because they were doing what they thought was right. So that brings us to the end of Judges. Now, next we're going to have, hang on, Ruth. So Ruth, we'll do next week, takes place during the period of Judges. And it's short, but it's important. It's a good one. And then we'll get into Samuel and Kings and see how far we can get. So, that's tonight. Let's close again real quick in prayer, and then I'll see you next week. Lord, thank you for this evening. Thank you for giving us the ability to be together. Whether we watched it live or we're watching it later on, I pray that your message would come through and that your words were spoken through me. I pray that you would open the eyes of people that don't necessarily know you that well, and that they would start to understand your word, maybe in a different way than they ever have. I just pray that in these discussions and these studies that we would just be brought closer to you. It's in your precious name that we pray. Amen. Oh, look, he was at my feet the whole time. He was like, I love Bible study, Daddy. Have a good night from me and Franklin. I gotta find the button. Here we go. Look, Franklin. Good night.